Welcome, dear students. Today we have another very important topic from the history of Indian education. It is the Indian Education Commission 1882. It was the first education commission of India. It is popularly known as the Hunter Commission after the name of its chairperson, Sir William Hunter. Now, let us have a look on the reasons for setting up the commission. What were the reasons behind it? As a result of revolt of 1857, the British East India Company lost its administrative powers and the powers were transferred to the British Crown. The need was felt to reassess the educational situation in the country and to reconsider why the recommendations of Wood's Dispatch of 1854 were not implemented. Consequently, an organization named General Council of Education was formed, and this organization asked the then Viceroy of India, Lord Ripon, to look into the state of education in India. As a result of which, Lord Ripon, the then Viceroy of India, constituted Indian Education Commission 1882. He appointed Sir William Wilson Hunter as its chairman. The commission consisted of 20 members with 7 Indian members: Anand Mohan Bose, Bhudev Mukherjee, Maharaja Jatindra Mohan Tagore, K.T. Talang, Syed Mahmood, Haji Ghulam, and P.R. Mudalia were prominent members of the commission. The commission, after 10 months of hard labor, produced a report of about 700 pages and submitted its report in March 1883. Following objectives were laid down before the commission: to assess the state of Indian education in the provinces, in the British provinces, with a special reference to primary education; to inquire about the non-implementation of Wood Dispatch recommendation and the utilization of its grant in aid; to evaluate the work of missionaries in the field of education, as after the revolt of 1857 it was felt that religious sentiments of Indians should not be hurt. The Britishers wanted a policy of religious neutrality, while the motive behind the missionaries' work in this respect was a big question mark. So, to evaluate the work of missionaries was one of the objectives of the commission. To find out whether the government institution should be allowed to continue or indigenous attempts in the field of education should be encouraged; to find out the attitude of the government towards private Indian institutions; and last of all, though the commission was set up with the primary aim to assess the status of the Indian education with special reference to primary education, but it was also mentioned that the objective of the commission was to inquire into the state of secondary education and higher education in the provinces of British and to suggest reform in this respect. Recommendations of the commission. The Hunter Commission report was quite a comprehensive one, which included recommendations related to all levels of education as well as other areas related to education. There were about 300 recommendations related to various aspects of education. These recommendations were mostly related to primary education, secondary education, higher education as well. Beside, it recommended on women education, Muslim education, and religious education, the nature of religious education in educational institutions, and education of backward classes. The Hunter Commission studied the problems of primary education from every angle and gave elaborate suggestions for its reform. There were about 36 recommendations regarding primary education in the Commission. With respect to the management of the primary education, the Commission placed the responsibility of education on district boards, municipal boards, and town areas. Thus, it made the government free from the responsibility of education of the Indians. Policy for primary education was that steps should be taken to develop primary education and it should be spread among the masses, and backward and tribal people should be encouraged to receive primary education. Aims of education were such that Commission observed that the primary education should be related to life and should be practical and useful. Its purpose should be to make students self-dependent, and its curriculum should consist of such subjects which may further these goals. The students should be given primary education through the medium of their mother tongue. With respect to the curriculum of primary education, the Commission left the organization of the curriculum on provincial governments with suggestions that they should organize the same in their respective areas according to the needs of the locality concerned. But at the same time, Commission also suggested that subjects useful for life should be incorporated in the curriculum. It was suggested that subjects like agriculture, physics, geography, medicine, and accountancy should be incorporated because these subjects were very closely related to the life. With respect to the training schools, training of teachers, the Commission urged the necessity of opening training schools for training the teachers. The Commission rightly thought that training of teachers was necessary for development of primary education. In this connection, it was said that training schools should be established at such places from where trained teachers may be made available for the areas where no trained teachers are available. There should be at least one normal school within the jurisdiction of each inspector of school. There were many indigenous schools at that time, prevalent at that time, and it was thought that these indigenous institutions, which were imparting education to people on the old traditional Indian pattern, they should be they are very useful for imparting primary education, so it recommended financial grants for such indigenous institutions. Though the commission was basically appointed for primary education, it also examined the conditions of higher education and secondary education and gave certain suggestions and recommendations in this respect. Here are certain recommendations with respect to secondary education. The government should entrust the responsibility of secondary education wholly to the Indians, and the government should give just financial grants in removing certain difficulties. Education to be organized according to the local needs. The Commission indirectly pleaded for English as the medium of instruction and ignored the claim of mother tongue in at secondary level. Commission suggested that the curriculum should be divided into two parts. The first part should be related to literary and science subject, and the other part should be related to vocational subjects. The Commission also emphasized the necessity of teachers training for raising the standards of secondary education. At the time of Hunter Commission, there were only two training schools in the country, one at Lahore, the other at Madras. So there was quite dearth of trained teachers. The Commission recommended that such teachers should be trained and more institutions should be opened in this respect, and trainees should be examined both in theory and practice of teaching. The Commission also examined the situation of higher education in India and suggested certain reforms in this respect. It was that the grants should be given keeping in view the number of teachers and students and need and capacity of the institution. sufficient grants for developing well-equipped infrastructure like experimental laboratories, reading rooms, libraries, equipment, furniture, science room, etc. It should be seen that these grants are well utilized by the institution. And for appointing teachers, people with European education should be preferred. Mhm. The Commission also suggested measures regarding the policy to be followed in educational institutions with respect to religious education. It was suggested that the government should not interfere in schools regarding religious education and no restrictions on the managers of non-government schools to provide religious education in their institutions. It means that they were free to adopt the policy for religious education in their institutions. And it was also suggested that while giving grants, special attention should be paid to the standards of the school which give religious education. These are certain recommendations given by the Hunter Commission with regard to women education in special subjects. The Commission felt that the curriculum for girls should be different from that of boys because of the different nature of their duties. The Commission thought that literary subjects should not be useful for girls, therefore, they should be given education in subjects useful in their life. Education to be provided by local boards. It was recommended that the local boards should be made responsible for women's education. In the absence of local board in some areas, the government should shoulder the responsibility for women education. And appointment of women teachers should be there for women institutions. It was recommended that only lady teachers should be appointed in girls' schools, and it was also recommended that the inspectress for girls' schools should be appointed. This policy would encourage women education also. Liberal grants in aid for girls' education institution was given, and special provisions for parda observing ladies were made. It was observed by the Commission that Muslims were quite backward in their education, so certain suggestions were recommended in this respect, that the indigenous Muslim schools should be encouraged, medium of Muslim schools should be Hindustani, assistance in the field of higher education should be given to Muslim children, special provisions for scholarships for Muslim students should be made, and normal schools for training of Muslim teachers should be opened, and existing Muslim schools should be recognized and encouraged. All these suggestions were given by the Commission to encourage Muslim education. Here are certain other recommendations given by the Commission. These were related to the education for backward classes. It was recommended that schools, special government schools, should be opened for children of backward classes, and special facilities should be provided to such classes. Apart from these, they were it encouraged, it suggested for education of Aborigines. The Commission suggested that a special provision should be made for education of Aborigines, and special types of schools should be opened in the areas keeping in view the geographical and social conditions and the traditions of the people. Special provisions should be made for education of the Aborigines. The missionary education. The missionaries had high hope, but all their hopes were shattered as the Commission suggested that the primary education management should be given to the local authorities. They were terribly annoyed when the commission suggested that the government schools should be entrusted to private enterprises, but it did not include missionaries in private enterprises. Against the missionaries, the commission observed that the missionaries should never be given full control in the field of education, as they can never win the sympathy and respect of the Indian people. Hence, the missionaries were very much discouraged, and the recommendations of the commission encouraged Indian private enterprises a great deal. Now let us have a look on the strengths of the Hunter Commission. The Commission provided a quite wide range of recommendations related to primary education level, secondary education level, and higher education level. It gave a new direction to the Indian education. It encouraged private enterprises in the field of education, and with respect to the grant and aid system, which was quite uneven before, it suggested it should be uniform. There should be uniformity in grant and aid system, and same policy should be followed throughout the country. So these were the strengths of this commission. There are certain weaknesses of the commission. They may be related to the transfer of control of primary education in the hands of inexperienced local bodies, inadequate grants from provincial government for running the educational institutions. Indian languages were neglected as English was made the medium of instruction. They totally neglected the claim of mother tongue. Suggestion to charge lower fee in private institutions led to the opening of lower standards of institutions. As education was transferred to private hands, so government became indifferent to the education of the people.